in the heart of ancient England, where forests stretched like green oceans and time moved slowly. There were roads that twisted gently beneath the shadows of tall trees. These roads were not paved with stone, but shaped by centuries of wagons, hooves, and footsteps, their dirt packed smooth by the endless rhythm of passage. Along these paths, heavy carriages rolled, creaking under the weight of gold coins, silver plates, and treasures gathered from across the realm, pulled by sturdy horses and guarded by armored men. These treasure wagons moved slowly, purposefully, through the deep silence of Sherwood Forest. The trees around them whispered softly with every breeze, as if sharing secrets with one another. Squirrels darted across mossy branches, and birds fluttered overhead, their songs a gentle backdrop to the slow procession. This was a world far, removed from noise or haste, a place where even danger moved softly. The treasure carriages were always built from the strongest oak, bound in black iron, their wheels thick and grooved to survive rough terrain. Inside the locked compartments lay coins collected from taxes, relics seized from monasteries, and gifts from noblemen eager to please the crown. But not all who watched these journeys did so with admiration or fear. Some, hidden among the trees and brush, watched with silent resolve. These were not bandits, though they lived outside the law. They were outlaws with a purpose, guardians of the forgotten, protectors of the poor. Their leader was known throughout the land by a name that echoed like wind through pine trees: Robin Hood. Robin Hood was not just a man. He was a story come to life. Some said he had the eyes of a hawk and the heart of a lion. Others whispered that he could vanish like mist and speak with the trees. Truth and legend blended in his name, and his deeds lived in the songs of villagers and the warnings of soldiers. Robin never stole for himself. He saw the treasure wagons as symbols of injustice, gold taken from those with empty bellies to decorate the halls of the wealthy. And so, whenever a wagon entered Sherwood, Robin's eyes would find it. He would wait. Sherwood Forest itself was a companion to Robin and his men. Its winding paths and dense canopies provided both shelter and strategy. The sun barely pierced through the thick branches, casting soft, dappled light on the woodland floor. Deer tiptoed among the brambles. Foxes listened from afar, and the trees held their breath when danger passed beneath them. It was not a forest of fear, but one of quiet strength. And on the days when the treasure carriages came, it felt as if the whole woodland knew. The birds grew silent. The winds slowed. The world prepared for something to change. One such morning, wrapped in mist and the scent of pine, a procession of 3 treasure carriages creaked slowly through the edge of the forest. Their guards rode close, scanning the trees with practiced suspicion. The lead horse snorted nervously, sensing more than the riders could see. Somewhere beyond the trees, Robin watched. He was high on a thick branch, his bow across his back, his breath calm. He didn't need to rush. Time in Sherwood was different. It moved not by the ticking of clocks, but by the rhythm of the forest. And now the forest was beginning to stir beneath him. One of his companions signaled silently, a flick of the hand, a nod. The carriages had entered the narrowest part of the road, surrounded on both sides by dense undergrowth. This was the place Robin had chosen days ago after walking the path in the moonlight, measuring the soil with his fingers. It was perfect, quiet, hidden, with space for retreat if needed. He nodded once and slipped down from the tree. In the forest of Sherwood, ambushes did not begin with chaos. They began with breath, deep, quiet, measured, a kind of breath that comes before a storm. Or a legend. The forest was still, but the air had changed. It carried a subtle electricity, the quiet thrill that comes when something is about to happen. The guards didn't speak, but their posture shifted, Hands moved closer to sword hilts. Eyes darted to shadows. Then it came, not a scream, not a clash, but a soft thud, barely louder than a raindrop. An arrow, feathered in green, had embedded itself into the trunk of an old elm tree just beside the trail. Tied to it was a strip of linen, fluttering softly like a whisper in the wind. It was not a threat, it was a message. This was Robin Hood's signature, a sign both poetic and firm. The guards halted the carriages. Horses snorted, uneasy. The captain of the escort dismounted and walked slowly to the arrow. He read the words written on the linen: "Return the gold to the people, or the forest will claim it." He did not smile. He knew the stories. He had heard the songs in the taverns. This was no bluff. When Robin left a message, he meant it, but turning back was not an option. The gold belonged to the king, and the king did not accept fear as an excuse. The captain ordered the march to continue, but more slowly, with the guards in tighter formation. The forest seemed to lean in now, the trees closer, the light dimmer. Every bird call felt like a signal. Every rustle in the underbrush felt intentional. Somewhere out there, men moved without sound. Somewhere, bows were drawn and eyes sharp, as falcons watched every hoofprint. But no attack came yet. Only silence, a silence heavy with expectation. The carriages moved like boats through thick fog, visible, vulnerable, and unsure of what awaited ahead. Robin Hood waited. He did not rush. Timing was everything. His men were in place. Little John by the ridge, Will Scarlet by the fallen log, Marion near the trail bend with 2 quiet archers. They had no interest in blood. Their aim was precision, not violence. Robin watched the carriages pass beneath him, counting the guards, mapping their movements like a conductor studying a quiet symphony before the crescendo. This was not just a robbery, it was a performance. One the forest itself seemed to hold its breath for as the rear carriage crossed the narrowest point of the path. A small twig snapped. It was not an accident. It was a signal. In that instant, a third arrow flew, not to harm, but to strike the wooden door of the last carriage. The horses reared slightly, and the guards turned toward the sound. That was when Robin dropped silently to the path. High's boots landed with barely a sound. He stepped forward, bow notched, but lowered. He spoke gently, not like a threat, but like a promise. "There is still time," he said, "to make the right choice." The captain raised his hand. His men held their ground. The air felt thick, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. And then, slowly, the captain removed his helmet. His face was tired. He looked at Robin for a long time and said, "Only do what you came to do. But know this, not all of us are your enemies." Robin nodded once, then whistled low. From the shadows, his companions emerged, quiet as deer. The moment had begun, and with it, a legend continued to grow in the silent breath of Sherwood. The first thing the guards noticed was how quiet everything had become. No birds chirped, no wind rustled through the trees. Even the horses seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Okay, in that pause, time stretched like melted wax, dripping slowly from the candle of the world. The forest was a cathedral, and the trees its silent congregation. Every movement from Robin's band was slow, deliberate, careful. There was no panic, only purpose. Little John stepped forward from the brush, a man taller than most, carrying a staff of polished ash wood. His presence alone was enough to cause hesitation, but his eyes were kind and his steps gentle. He moved toward the second carriage, checking the locks. They were iron-bound and etched with royal seals, but not unbreakable. With a practiced motion, he reached into a pouch, removing a simple tool made of bone and brass. With one twist, The first lock gave way. Marion moved to the front, watching the flanks. Her hair was tucked beneath a hunter's hood, and her gaze was sharper than any blade. She held no weapon in her hand, only a pouch of healing herbs. If someone were to fall, she would be the one to ease their pain. This was not a raid of rage. It was a correction, as natural as rain falling on dry land. Behind her, a young lad named Alan carried a sack for the coins. He did not speak, but his face showed both awe and fear. This was his first real outing. The gold inside the carriages shimmered faintly in the low light. Coins stamped with royal, faces, rings with bloodline crests. A cup inlaid with emeralds, but to Robin's eyes, these were not treasures. They were stories. Stories of peasants whose grain had been taken, of blacksmiths who worked unpaid, of mothers who had buried their children because they couldn't afford medicine. Each coin was a sorrow made solid, and now it would be returned to the soil from which it had been taken. Robin reached for the nearest sack of coins, weighing it in his hands. He did not smile. He never did during these moments. There was no joy in righting or wrong, only necessity. He passed the sack to Alan, who held it as if it were something sacred. Around them, the others moved in quiet patterns. No shouting, no running. Even the leaves beneath their boots barely crunched. It was as if the very earth wished for gentleness in this act of reclaiming. The guards remained still, weapons drawn but not raised. They had heard too many tales, seen too many ambushes go wrong. Robin Hood was not like the others. He did not kill for sport. He did not mock the weak. Came and went like a prayer whispered in the night, sharp, soft, and unforgettable. And as the treasure was removed from the carriages, the forest remained silent, almost reverent, as if bearing witness to something ancient and necessary. Asterisk, as the last of the coins were passed from carriage to sack. The sun began to filter gently through the trees. Its golden light spilled across the moss-covered ground like a blessing, soft and warm. Its shadows no longer seemed threatening, but thoughtful, as though the forest had witnessed a deed of justice and nodded in approval. Robin stood at the edge of the trail, watching his people work. No one rushed. No one needed to. In Sherwood, time was an ally, not a master. A deer stepped quietly into the clearing, pausing near the tree line. Its eyes, large and dark, blinked slowly as it took in the sight of humans and horses, of gold and stillness. It did not run. The guards saw it too, and for a moment, even their tension softened. It was as though nature itself was reminding everyone that peace was possible, that even in a world ruled by lords and soldiers, quiet harmony could still be found. The deer tilted its head and disappeared into the woods again. Robin approached the captain once more. "No blood," he said softly. "No war, it's just balance." The captain didn't respond right away. He looked to his men, then to the empty carriages, then to the woods. Finally, he said, "You've taken what the king will not miss, but the villagers will remember." There was no anger in his voice, only a weariness born of too many years escorting gold he would never touch for a ruler he barely knew. Robin placed a hand on his shoulder briefly, then turned away. The outlaws melted back into the trees, one by one. Marion walked last, her steps light, her eyes scanning for stragglers. No trace would be left behind, no mark but the memory. The guards began adjusting the horses' harnesses, preparing for the journey back. They would return without treasure, but not empty. They carried a new story now, one of mercy in the shadows, story to whisper by firelight, story that would linger longer than gold. Deeper in the forest, the outlaws regrouped. They would not count their treasure tonight. That was not Robin's way. First, they would rest. Then, They would decide how best to return the wealth. Which villages needed flour, which mothers lacked blankets, which old men needed roofs over their heads. Every coin would find a purpose. Nothing would be wasted. They sat beneath a wide oak tree, sharing bread and dried fruit. The silence between them was peaceful, filled with unspoken trust. Above them, the branches swayed gently. Leaves shimmered in the sunlight, casting flickering shadows that danced like spirits. Sherwood was alive. It had seen kings and killers, poets and priests, but it favored none, simply endured, offering shelter to those who listened. And tonight, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the forest was content. It had done its part. The road was cleared. The treasure had returned to its roots. And Robin Hood's legend had grown another leaf. Asterix night fell slowly over Sherwood, with stars blinking into view like the eyes of forgotten gods. A fire crackled gently in the middle of a small clearing, its flames low and warm, casting soft orange light over the outlaws' tired faces. They sat in a wide circle, legs stretched out, hands cupped around bowls of stew. The meal was simple: roots, herbs, a few scraps of dried meat, but it tasted rich in the chill air. No one spoke loudly. Whispers were enough. Alan, the young lad who had carried the coin sack, sat near Little John, eyes wide with wonder. "Was that your first mission?" John asked, voice like gravel smoothed by kindness. Alan nodded quickly. "I didn't drop a single coin," he said with a shy smile. John chuckled. "That's a good sign. The forest accepted you." Marion passed Alan a second bowl of stew. "You've earned it," she said. "Tomorrow we'll show you how to mend a bowstring." Robin sat a little apart, his back against an old tree. His eyes reflected the firelight, but his thoughts were far away. He always carried the weight of what they took, not just gold, but power. Every coin reclaimed was a message to the crown. Every carriage emptied stirred winds that reached castles, yet he never wavered. "Better the risk than silence," he once told Marion. "Better 100 shadows than one tyrant in the sun." The fire popped softly, and someone began to hum an old tune, half lullaby, half prayer. It drifted upward into the trees, where owls watched quietly and foxes curled beneath brambles. There was peace here, not because danger was gone, but because it had been faced. In this firelight, there were not outlaws or rebels. They were just people, sharing warmth after a long day, beneath the sky full of stars. Alan leaned his head against John's shoulder and yawned. "Do you think the king dreams of us?" he asked sleepily. John smiled. "If he does, he dreams of shadows and songs." Marion pulled her cloak tighter around her and added, "Let him dream. We live in truth." And with that, they settled in for the night, one by one, slipping into dreams that smelled of pine and smoke in the distance. The sound of a slow stream whispered through the trees. The forest never slept completely. It listened. It remembered. It held the weight of 1,000 nights like this one, quiet victories beneath ancient stars. And as the last flame died down, the clearing grew dim, wrapped in darkness, not of fear, but of rest. The story would continue with the next sunrise. The morning mist returned with the dawn, curling between trees like soft breath from the earth. Robin awoke early, as he always did, before the birds began their songs. With careful hands, he unrolled a piece of old leather, a map drawn by candlelight many winters ago. It showed the hidden paths of Sherwood, known only to a few. Each mark was a memory, a glade where food was shared, a stream where wounds were healed, a bend where gold was taken and given back. Marion joined him, brushing pine needles from her cloak. "Another caravan moves tomorrow," she whispered. Robin nodded. "From York to Leicester. They'll pass the old Roman road." That road was wider, faster, but less protected by nature. It ran like a scar across the land, open to wind and sun, and thus to risk. Robin preferred the quiet paths, but sometimes the crown moved its wealth boldly. That required care, not aggression, but wisdom. Robin used a stick to trace their route in the dirt. He planned like a gardener, not a warrior, planting ideas, nurturing timing, and pruning risk. The goal was never chaos. The goal was to make the powerful pause. "We'll meet them by the oak split in two," he said. The one struck by lightning. Marian smiled. A fitting place. Nature marks what matters. They stood together, not just as allies, but as guardians of a deeper balance. Later, that morning, Robin called the others. They gathered beneath a tall elm where dappled light painted their faces. Little John, Will Scarlet, Much the miller's son, and a few newer recruits. Robin spoke softly, but everyone leaned in. "We take only what was taken," he said. "We hurt none who did not raise a blade. We leave no scars upon the land." The rules were clear, always had been. The forest gave them shelter, and in return, they gave it peace. The day was spent in preparation. Boughs were restrung, boots repaired, cloaks patched. Alan learned how to walk without snapping twigs. A dance of breath and footstep. Will showed him how to spot hidden rope traps, while Much taught him how to mimic bird calls to signal others. These were not just thieves, okay? They were caretakers of an ancient craft, defenders who wore no uniform, but carried the weight of a people's hope. As the sun lowered once more, turning the leaves golden, the map was rolled away. It would not be needed tomorrow. They knew the forest by heart, and Sherwood, in turn, knew them. The breeze that passed through the trees felt like a quiet promise that if they walked with care and truth, the forest would never betray them. It would shelter them like a mother shelters her children, okay? In roots, in rain, in deep, endless shadow. Asterisk, the caravan arrived late in the morning, its wheels already coated in dust from miles of uneven road. There were 2 carriages this time, one with gold, the other with documents sealed in wax. The escort was smaller than expected. 4 guards, tired and lightly armed, with one old horse limping slightly. Robin watched from a ridge above the Roman road, his eyes scanning not the guards, but the terrain. A small dip near the path, loose stone, okay, and there a crack in the carriage wheel. He didn't smile, but he noted it. "We won't need to act," he whispered to Marian. "The road will do it for us." As if on cue, the wheel hit the dip and twisted. The iron ring groaned and gave way. The carriage tilted, spilling one of its chests to the earth. Gold coins rolled like marbles through the dust. The guards scrambled to recover them, swearing softly. They were not cruel men, just exhausted. One muttered, "Why not bury it all and be done with it?" Robin approached slowly, hands empty, posture calm. He stepped from the woods as if he were part of the morning itself, soft, cool, and unexpected. "It's quite the mess," he said gently. The guards froze, but he raised both hands. "I'm not here to take lives, only to borrow what you can't keep." One guard looked ready to protest, but another, older and pale from heat, simply sat on the ground. "Take it," he said. "Gold won't fix a broken wheel." Marian and Will appeared next, followed by Alan, who stood back, wide-eyed. The coins were collected, not in haste, but with reverence, each one placed into a cloth sack as if it were fragile. When the guards saw the care, some of their fear faded. Robin nodded to the one who sat. "We'll leave you enough to buy a new wheel and oats for your horses." The man nodded slowly, almost gratefully. More than the king would do. By the time the outlaws vanished into the trees again, the road had quieted. The gold chest was lighter. The guards had kept their lives. The broken wheel had taught another quiet lesson, that sometimes justice arrives, not with war, but with weather, weight, and worn roads. Back in Sherwood, Robin whispered to the wind, "Let the land guide our hands." And the wind, it seemed, answered with a breeze that tasted of pine and distant rain. Asterisk, in the depths of Sherwood, near a stream that ran clear and cold, stood the remnants of an old stone chapel. It had no roof, only walls of ivy-covered stone, and a small altar still intact beneath the open sky. Robin often came here when the weight of their missions pressed too deeply on his shoulders. It was a place of silence, of prayer without words. The birds seemed to sing more softly here. Even the wind tiptoed around the stones. One evening, after the broken wheel affair, Robin sat alone by the altar, turning a silver coin between his fingers. It was not from the king's chest, but from a merchant caravan robbed weeks before. The merchant had cried for bread while soldiers loaded spices. Robin had returned the coin to him in secret. The merchant was thriving, his bakery warm with life. This coin reminded Robin of why he fought, not for gold, but for balance. Marian arrived quietly, placing a small loaf beside him. "Still thinking of the wheel?" she asked. Robin shook his head. "Thinking of the weight we carry, how it never really gets lighter." Marian smiled faintly. "But our backs grow stronger." She sat beside him, her presence a comfort, more than a conversation. Together, they listened to the trees, the stream, the memory of distant bells that once rang from the broken tower. Sometimes the outlaws gathered here to speak not of plans told, but of hopes. Much told stories of when his father planted barley, or recited lines from poems he could barely read. Alan asked questions about stars and kings and why people forget kindness so easily. And Robin listened. He never spoke of his past. In this chapel, he allowed himself to dream of a world where no one had to steal to restore justice. The moon rose above the wall, casting pale light across the moss-covered floor. They would return to their shelters soon, but for now, they let themselves rest in the old stone's embrace. The forest did not judge. It only listened, teased, and in places like this, the silence healed. It stitched together the frayed edges of courage. It reminded them they were not just fighters. They were believers in a gentler tomorrow. Before they left, Marian placed a flower on the altar. A tiny gesture, unseen by kings or courts, but felt deeply by the land. Robin touched the stone, whispered a quiet vow, and turned toward the trees once more. The chapel would remain not to shelter bodies, but to remind hearts that even ruins can offer peace. Asterisk news came one morning of a carriage unlike any other, not bearing gold, but art. It belonged to a noble collector, obsessed with relics and beauty, who traveled with portraits, statues, and rare objects meant for display in the Duke's Hall. Robin was uncertain at first. "It's not gold," he said. "Not food, not fuel." But Marian tilted her head. And yet, they hoard. Beauty, while villages go without color, was enough. They would investigate. The carriage arrived on a trail framed by flowering hawthorn trees. It glimmered with gold filigree and bright red paint. 2 guards rode ahead, and one walked alongside a young man, his eyes scanning the woods, not with fear, but with wonder. He paused now and then to admire the blossoms. Robin noticed. "He's not like the others," he murmured. "He sees the forest, not just the path." They waited until the guards made camp near a bend in the road. As night settled in, Robin approached alone, without a bow, only carrying a small jug of wine. The guard startled, but Robin raised the jug, a gift for a moment of truth. The young man looked at him, then nodded. They sat on a log together, sipping slowly. Robin asked, "Do you love what you guard?" The man replied, "I love what's inside. Yes, but I hate who owns it." In time, Robin entered the carriage. He saw paintings of saints, of rivers, of harvests. A mask carved from cedar wood stared back at him, its smile wide and strange. It was beautiful, but beauty hoarded is like bread, left to mold. He took only a few pieces, a painting of a mother and child, a sculpture of a wheat field, a scroll of old poems. "We'll give these to the school near Derby," he said. "Let the children see something beyond sorrow." The young guard did not stop them. Cat. He helped pack the art carefully, wrapping it in cloth to protect it from the rain. "Tell them it was a gift," he said, "from someone who used to guard walls, but now plant seeds." Robin smiled softly. "You'll always have a place in the green." They left him by the fire, the masts still inside the carriage, its smile untouched, watching the night as they walked into the woods. Marian whispered, "Art is memory." Robin nodded. "And memory must belong to everyone." That night, beneath the sky brushed with stars, the forest held its breath as brushstrokes, once locked in gilded rooms, finally found their way home to open eyes and grateful hearts. In a quiet glen surrounded by birch trees, a messenger arrived with trembling hands. He was no older than 16, dressed in gray wool and carrying a satchel worn thin. He did not ask for food or shelter, only Robin. When the outlaws brought him to the clearing, he offered a sealed letter, edges frayed, but ink still fresh. No crest, no seal, just a single line on the outside, to the one who hears what kings ignore. Robin opened it beneath the soft shade of the birch. The letter was written in careful hand. It spoke of hunger in a southern village, of land taken for taxes, of a boy lost to cold when firewood ran out. There was no demand, no plea, only a description of truth so heavy it made the page itself seem heavier. Marian read it beside him and whispered, "Whoever wrote this carries more than sorrow." They carried clarity. The village was called Eastmere, a place barely marked on maps, nestled between marshland and hills. The king's men rarely visited, except to collect. Robin decided at once. "We'll go," he said. "Not to take, but to give." Ain't packed carts with blankets, herbs, cheese, dried fish. Coins remained hidden in cloaks. "We'll wear no masks," he said. "Let them see our faces. Let them know justice walks on feet like theirs." It took 2 days to reach Eastmere. Along the way, they saw signs of loss, broken fences, dry wells, fields left fallow. But when they entered the village, no one ran, no one shouted. Instead, a woman stepped forward with tired eyes and said, "We hoped you were real." They gave what they had, and more. Kay listened. They sat by fires. They sang old songs. The children laughed, the first sound of joy in many moons. Night, the same boy who had delivered the letter asked Robin, "Will you stay?" Robin placed a hand on his shoulder. "We belong to the roads, lad, but your voice, your truth reached us. Never stop writing." The boy smiled, not with pride, but with purpose. His words had moved mountains, wrapped in trees. And that was enough. When they left Eastmere, the wind carried with it not just warmth, but recognition. Robin did not always know who needed him next, but letters like this, honest, nameless, brave, were the breadcrumbs that guided his journey. For in Sherwood and beyond it, the truth always found its way through the leaves. Asterisks the skies over Sherwood, darkened with slow-moving clouds, heavy with rain that had waited patiently for days. The forest welcomed it. Leaves reached upward like open palms, and the soil drank deeply. For Robin and his companions, rain was never a foe, only another rhythm in the song of the woods. They traveled lighter during storms, cloaks pulled, tight footsteps softened by the wet earth. On this day, they followed no treasure, but a rumor that a royal bishop's robe was being transported in secret. This robe, sewn with thread of gold and decorated with sapphire inlays, was meant for a coronation in the Northern Territories. It traveled not in an armored carriage, but in a modest cart covered in canvas to avoid attention. Robin had no interest in robes, but he had heard that a village on the robe's path had been stripped of cloth for taxes. Blankets, tunics, even the priest's vestments had been taken. And yet gold threads march on, he murmured, alas, bring warmth back to the people. They waited in the rain near an old stone arch where water pooled and frogs sang softly. The cart arrived late, its wheels dragging in the mud. The driver was a kind-looking man with soft hands and gentle eyes. When Robin appeared, the man did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he laughed quietly. "I thought you'd come," he said. "I hoped you would." He stepped down from the cart and offered the reins without resistance. Inside the cart was the robe, shimmering despite the gray day, carefully wrapped and untouched by rain. Robin admired its craft, but sighed at its purpose. "Let's stitch something new," he said. Marian cut sections of the robe's lining to create scarves. Lon bundled the outer fabric, light but warm, into rolls for the children. The gold thread was saved for mending the old altar cloth in Eastmere. The cart left lighter. The forest felt fuller. The driver chose to stay behind. "I'll walk to the next town," he said. "I'd rather be remembered for what was given than what was guarded." Robin gave him a loaf and a kind smile. "Then walk with pride. You've changed more lives than that robe ever could." "'Kay?" And as the rain thickened, they shared a meal beneath a tree that smelled of rain and sap, wrapped in silence and soaked robes, hearts dry with purpose. By dusk, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the woods shimmered with droplets like silver beads. The robe was gone, but in its place, the people would be wrapped in dignity again. In Sherwood, riches were not measured by crowns or cloth, but by the warmth passed hand to hand, stitched not with gold, but with intention. Asterisk, there was a bridge near the eastern edge of Sherwood that stretched over a slow, winding river. It was old, built by stonemasons long forgotten, and it groaned softly when carts crossed. One morning, a merchant caravan reached it, 3 wagons, brightly painted, carrying spices, perfumes, and bolts of velvet. The merchant, a large man with rings on every finger, spoke loudly of his wealth. "The king buys my saffron," he boasted. "The queen asks for nothing but my silks." Robin watched from the trees, arms crossed. "And yet, his workers live in rags," he murmured. He had heard of this merchant. It's known for cheating widows and taxing millers unfairly. His name appeared in more than one villager's letter. "We'll toll the bridge today," Robin said. "Not with coins, but with conscience." Will Scarlet smiled. "Let's see how heavy truth feels." They stepped onto the bridge as the first wagon approached. The guards raised their weapons, but Robin simply lifted a hand. "Today's toll is different," he said. "Tell your master he must answer 3 questions." Confused, the merchant emerged, puffing with annoyance. "What nonsense is this?" Robin gestured calmly. "Speak truthfully and pass freely. Lie, and we take only what the poor have already lost." The merchant sneered, but agreed. Robin's first question was simple. "How many workers sew your silks, and how many eat at your table?" The merchant hesitated. 10 work. It's time." Marian asked the second. "Have you ever forgiven a debt owed by someone with nothing?" Silence. "No," the man said. Will stepped forward for the third. "If your goods vanished today, who would weep more, you or those who bought them?" The merchant's mouth opened, then closed. Robin nodded. "And you pay." From the wagons, they took fabric and herbs, leaving perfumes and spice. "Vanity can wait," Marian said, "but warmth cannot." As they finished, the merchant asked, "Are you thieves or priests?" Robin looked back. "We are neither. We are mirrors. The merchant said nothing more. His wagons rolled on, lighter in burden, heavier in truth, and as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the water, Robin and his companions sat near the bridge, passing velvet cloth to wrap newborns in nearby villages. The toll had been paid, not in gold, but in honesty. And in the stillness of twilight, the forest whispered its approval. Asterisk, a small river ran like a silver thread through the belly of Sherwood. It curved around stones and roots, whispering tales to those who listened. One morning, while fishing for trout, Much the miller's son noticed something odd. A patch of reeds flattened near the bank. It's curious. He stepped closer and found footprints. Not animal, not outlaw. New, small, barefoot. A child had passed through here recently, alone. He ran back to the camp, breathless. A child in the woods, he said. Robin stood immediately. No child wanders this deep alone. They followed the trail, silent and swift. It led them through brambles, across fallen logs, down into a hollow where the trees grew thick and the light thinned. There, near the water, they found a girl, no older than 7, wrapped in a blanket, too thin for the night. She looked up with tired eyes, but did not run. "Are you ghosts?" she asked softly. Marian knelt, only the kind that carry bread. They learned her name was Leela. Her family had fled a village burned in a tax dispute. Separated during the night, she had followed the river, believing it would lead her to safety. "It led you to us," Robin said gently. "That's enough for now." They brought her back to the glade, fed her stew, wrapped her in warmth, ate without fear. "You smell like the trees," she told Will. "And you talk like a song," she told Marian. Robin carved her a flute from ashwood. "The river brought you here," he said. "Now let your voice follow it back." That night she played softly by the fire, a tune both brave and broken. The next morning they found her family with the help of local farmers. The reunion was quiet, full of tears and held hands. Robin left a pouch of coins with the mother. "Build new roots," he said. The woman wept, then kissed his hand. "You are not outlaws," she whispered. "You are the ones the land prays for." And when Leela looked back one last time, flute in hand, the forest seemed to lean toward her, like a curtain of green saying farewell. In Sherwood, not every treasure was gold. Some arrived with bare feet, tired eyes, and songs yet unsung. At the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned and smoke curled into the sky, there lived a blacksmith named Garrick. His forge had once echoed with the ring of iron and the hiss of steam, but now it was quiet. Taxes had taken his tools, debts had taken his ore, and sorrow had taken his voice. He lived alone, crafting small charms from scrap and selling them to travelers for bread. Yet within him, the fire still waited. Robin had heard of Garrick from an old woman whose son had once apprenticed there. "He used to sing while he worked," she said. "Now he only sighs." One morning, Robin visited him alone, bringing not weapons or coins, but iron, nails, rods, scraps gathered from broken swords and wagon wheels. "Can you build with this?" he asked. Garrick stared at the pile and then at Robin. "I don't build for war." Robin smiled. "Neither do we. But for those with nothing, a kettle hook or gate hinge is salvation." Slowly, the blacksmith's eyes lit. He took the iron, turned it in his palms, and without another word, lit his fire. The forge groaned, as if waking from sleep. Bellows wheezed, sparks danced. Kay, in Garrick's hands, rough but steady, remembered their dance. For the next week, the forge burned bright. Robin's companions delivered more iron, and Garrick crafted door latches, plow teeth, horseshoes. He even shaped new tools for the village carpenter. His voice returned, too soft at first, then louder, humming old tunes that filled the valley like wind over glass. Laughter followed. Children came to watch. The forest nearby felt warmer somehow, as if proud of the fire it helped rekindle. On the final day, Garrick presented Robin with a gift, a small dagger, simple and strong. "It's not for war," he said. "For truth." Robin took it with gratitude. "Then I'll carry it only when needed most." Garrick nodded, the soot on his face no match for the light in his eyes. He was no longer a broken man. He was the bellows of the people's hope, and as Robin left the forge behind, he looked back once, watching the smoke rise like a silent hymn to justice. Not all battles were fought in the woods. Some were won beside an anvil in the glow of a fire, with every breath that said, "We begin again." Asterisk, deep within Sherwood, game was plentiful. Deer, hare, pheasants, all watched over by the king's forest laws. Only nobles could hunt. Anyone else risked punishment, or worse, but the people were hungry. Robin, though an outlaw, followed his own code. He never hunted more than was needed. And when a single deer could feed 5 families, the choice was clear. Justice did not wear a crown. It wore hunger's eyes. One crisp morning, Little John spotted antlers in the mist. A great stag, old and proud, standing near a stream. "He watches us," John whispered. "He knows," Robin raised his bow but lowered it again. "Not this one. He's seen too many winters. He belongs to the forest." They walked away, leaving the stag untouched. Some acts of respect fed the soul more than the body. Instead, they tracked a smaller herd. They took only 2 deers that day, with swift arrows and whispered prayers. Marion led the butchering, clean and sacred. Each piece was used, meat salted, hides prepared, bones given to a local healer. Nothing wasted. When they delivered the food to the villages, they left it anonymously, wrapped in cloth with no signature but a sprig of pine. But word always spread. "The green gave again," people said. And though none saw who brought the meat, they sang songs by the fire, thanking the forest for its mercy. Robin listened from afar, leaning against a tree, heart full but quiet. "We are stewards," he said, "not saviors. The land provides, and we listen." One evening, a young noble tried to trap in Sherwood, hoping to show sport. He caught nothing, only a note on a tree. "You hunt for pride. We hunt for need. Leave before the forest decides." He never returned. Robin's code was not written in law, but in bark, in leaf. In the silence between hoofbeats and breath, the stag, old and tall, was seen again, weeks later, near the chapel ruins. He stood still as stone, watching the world with patient eyes. Those who saw him swore he bowed before disappearing into the mist. In Sherwood, even the animals knew honor, and Robin made sure it remained that way. Asterisk, by the bend of a slow-turning river, sat an abandoned mill, its wheel broken and stonework worn. Once, it had fed 5 villages with flour. Now, it fed only moss and memory. But Robin remembered it. As a boy, he had washed sacks of wheat carried in and bread carried out. Now, as a man, he stood beside its empty hearth and whispered, "Let it turn again." He sent word to the villagers, "Bring grain, bring hands, bring hope." And they came. Old men, children, mothers with babes strapped to their backs. They brought stories, too, of the days when the millstone hummed and the air smelled like sunrise. Little John and Much lifted the new wheel into place. Marion mixed the mortar. Alan swept the stones clean with careful strokes. By nightfall, the river pushed the wheel again. It turned slow, then steady, groaning like a giant stretching after a long sleep. The people cheered, not loudly, but with awe. A woman fell to her knees and wept. "My father built this," she said. "He would have smiled today." Robin placed a hand on her shoulder, then let his work feed the next child. The first sack of flour ground that night was shared at once. Flat bread roasted on hot stones. Steam rose into the air, carrying not just the scent of food, but the memory of plenty. They danced around the mill, tired feet tapping old rhythms. Laughter returned. The forest listened, and the moonlight wrapped them in silver warmth. No gold had been taken, no arrow fired. And yet, this was a greater victory. A machine of peace turned once more, and with it, the hearts of those who had forgotten how to hope. Robin stood at the edge, letting the sound of water and wheel wash over him. We mend more than wood, he thought. We restore what holds. The soul. By dawn, the people were gone, but the mill remained awake. Its wheel turned on, faithful and strong, whispering to the river, I am still needed. And in Sherwood, the wind carried the story far beyond the trees of bread reborn, of justice, quiet and warm, like flower between kind hands. Asterisk at the heart of Sherwood was a clearing where no birds sang, not from fear, but from reverence. It was called Lantern Hollow, though no fire had ever burned there, till one winter's night, when Robin lit a single lantern and placed it on a stump. For those we've lost, he said, and those still waiting. Its glow was soft, golden, and it did not flicker. Marian brought another, shaped like a star. Little John's was carved from clay, flickering through etched leaves. Soon, every outlaw had placed one. They sat around the light in silence, remembering names. A boy who drowned, a healer who starved, a knight who switched sides and paid. With his life, each flame was a memory, each glow a promise. As the night deepened, villagers came too, carrying their own lanterns. No one asked questions, no one needed to. The light spoke for them all. It was not celebration, it was honoring. Some wept, some sang, some simply watched the flames, letting them hold what words could not. Child placed a pebble beside each lamp, so the ground remembers too, she said. The clearing shone like a constellation, not bright, but eternal. And when dawn broke, the light did not vanish. It shifted into the leaves, the bark, the breath of morning. Robin walked among the lanterns once more and said, each one of these is why we still fight. Marian took his hand, and why we never lose. They left the lanterns in place, never disturbed. Some blew out over time, some were relit, but always the hollow remembered. It became a place of peace for travelers, rebels, and even old soldiers. The forest kept it secret and sacred, protecting it from the world's noise. And on quiet nights, when stars blinked gently through the branches, a warm glow still pulsed in Lantern Hollow, as if the trees themselves had learned to carry fire, not to burn, but to remember. There was a tree in Sherwood, older than most villages, a great oak whose trunk had split centuries before, but never fallen. Its bark was worn smooth where generations had rested their backs, and its roots curled like fingers beneath the soil. The outlaws called it the Witness, for it had seen every joy and every sorrow the forest had known. Robin often returned to it alone, placing a hand on its rough surface as if to listen to its memory. The tree never answered with words, but somehow, in its silent stillness, it soothed wounds no voice could reach. One crisp morning, Robin brought Alan to the oak. The boy had grown in strength and wisdom, his eyes now steady, his bowstring tighter. "You ready?" Robin said softly, his breath rising in mist. "Not just to draw a bow, but to carry the weight that comes with it." Alan looked up at the mass of branches overhead, then back to Robin. "What if I fail?" he whispered. Robin smiled gently, but then fail with honor, and learn faster than you fear. He placed a hand on Alan's shoulder, grounding him like the roots below their feet. They sat beneath the oak until the sun crept through the canopy. Marian arrived later, bringing bread and a folded cloth. Inside, it was a simple green feather, a symbol not of rank, but of readiness. "We don't knight our own," she said. "Okay? We don't crown or christen, but we honor by trust. Wear this when you walk with us." Alan took the feather and tucked it into his tunic. He didn't speak, not because he lacked words, but because some moments are sacred in silence. As the wind picked up, few brown leaves broke free, tumbling gently through the air like whispered blessings. The forest seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, Alan knelt and placed his palm on the earth. "I'll serve the people," he said softly. "Not the crown, not vengeance, only what's right." The oath echoed beneath the roots, between the branches, into the hearts of all who heard. And though no fanfare followed, the oaks seemed to lean slightly forward, as if nodding. When they returned to camp that night, no one asked questions. They saw the green feather, and they knew Alan had become one of them, not because of skill, but because he had chosen the harder path, the one of quiet bravery. He walked differently now, not with pride, but with purpose, and Robin, watching from the shadows, allowed himself a rare exhale. The forest grows new guardians, he thought, even as the old ones fade. The oak remained behind, wrapped in dusk, its great limbs holding centuries of promises. And if you passed by at the right hour, with the right heart, you might feel a warmth near its base, not from sun, but from stories planted deep and still blooming in the soil. Asterisk, far to the south of Sherwood. A royal falconer prepared a special delivery, a golden cage, silk-lined, holding within it a pure white falcon bred for the queen herself. It was to be sent north for a ceremonial hunt, along with a chain of pearls and a feathered headdress. The caravan that carried it was swift and quiet, guarded not by soldiers, but by trackers and scouts, those trained to avoid attention rather than challenge it. But Sherwood hears all feet, especially those that sneak. Robin heard of the delivery, not from a spy, but from a boy who cleaned stables in York. "They speak of wings worth more than houses," Lee had said, wide-eyed. Robin raised a brow, and they passed near Sherwood. The boy nodded. At dawn, near the weeping stone, it was enough. Not because Robin wanted the falcon, he had no use for royalty's vanity, but because the message it carried was louder than any cry. A bird fed on cream, while children begged for crumbs. They found the caravan just as dawn bloomed behind the trees, tainting the sky with delicate strokes of pink and copper. The falcon's cage was quiet, covered, but Robin could hear its talons tapping gently on the perch inside. He signaled for no arrows, no noise. Instead, they blocked the trail with fallen branches, forcing the riders to stop. Robin stepped forward alone, hands open. "She does not belong in a cage," he said. The falconer, a tall woman with sad eyes, met his gaze and whispered, "Neither do I." There was no fight. Leah paused, heavy with choice. Marian lifted the cloth covering the cage and looked into the falcon's eyes, sharp, ancient, aware. "She wants the sky," Marian said. Robin took the latch and opened the door. For a moment, the bird did not move. Then, with one great wing beat, she launched upward, slicing through the morning air like a sigh freed from a chest. She circled once, then twice, and vanished into the clouds, leaving only a single white feather behind. Robin handed the falconer a loaf of bread and a map. "Follow this west," he said. "It's a village where you can be more than a keeper of chains." The woman nodded slowly, cradling the feather like a talisman. "Thank you," she said, "for letting something holy fly again." The outlaws stepped back into the forest, letting the moment settle. The air was different now, lighter, cleaner, as if something unnatural had been set right. And that night, as they lay beneath stars, a soft white feather drifted into the campfire circle. No one had seen from where. But Robin picked it up and placed it in his pouch. Proof, he murmured, that not all things of beauty belong behind gold. And as sleep settled over Sherwood, the sky above seemed somehow more alive. Asterisk. In a quiet village nestled at the foot of the hills beyond Sherwood lived a man named Aldrich, a stonecutter with hands like river rock and eyes full of rain. He carved not just walls and wells, but faces, saints, scholars, kings. Yet few knew he had once worked in the royal city, designing the fountains that now filled courtyards of power with cold beauty. When he returned home, he brought no coin, only silence. Rumor said he had left something behind, a secret carved in stone. One cold evening, Robin visited him, hood drawn low. "You knew marble once," he said softly, "but you returned to clay?" Aldrich looked up from his chisel and offered a seat. "I learned," he said, "that stone holds what words cannot, and silence tells longer tales." Marian joined them, warming her hands near the hearth. "They say you left something behind," she said. Aldrich nodded slowly. "A truth no crown can bear. In the depths of the Queen's garden, there was a statue, a robed woman holding an open scroll. The writing on the scroll, barely visible, was written in the old tongue, lost to most. Aldrich remembered, says, a just ruler bows. First, he whispered, they thought it poetry, but it was rebellion, set in stone. Robin smiled faintly. "You spoke without a sword." Aldrich shrugged. "I spoke so it could not be unsaid." Robin offered him a task to carve a stone near the edge of Sherwood, a marker not of territory, but of memory. A place where names of the fallen could be etched, not for war, but for kindness. Aldrich agreed. "We'll need granite, patience." He smiled for the first time in years. Good things are slow. Days passed as he worked, and each chip of stone sang like a hymn beneath the trees. When the monument was finished, it bore no dates, no banners, only names, and at the bottom, a simple line they gave without asking. Villagers came to touch it, to cry quietly, to sit beside it in the grass. It became a place of pilgrimage, not for worship, but for remembering. Children learned names not found in books. Stories bloomed around each carving, and when Aldrich died years later, his name was added in silence, carved by Marian's careful hand. "The one who chiseled truth," she whispered. The forest never grew over the stone. Instead, it guarded it, and in the hush of certain mornings, you could hear the sound of a chisel echo through the roots, as if stone still had something left to say. Asterisk. In a valley wrapped in mist, where the hills rolled like sleeping giants, lived a woman named Brenna. She was known not for her strength or speed, but for her lantern, a small brass frame with cracked glass, passed down from her husband, who had perished during a famine tax. Every night, she lit it and placed it by the window, not to find someone, but to remind the world that she still hoped. "For what?" people asked. "For light to return," she would answer, without explanation. Robin first noticed the lantern during a ride through the outer paths. It flickered faintly across the fields, like a whisper that refused to vanish. Curious, he approached one evening and found Brenna sitting by the window, humming. She offered him tea before asking who he was. "A traveler," Robin replied, "looking for places where hope still burns." Brenna chuckled, her eyes tired but bright. "Then you've come to the right window." They spoke for hours. She told him how taxes had taken everything but the lantern, and how her husband's kindness was the only treasure that remained. Robin listened in silence, then gently placed a leather pouch on the table. It wasn't filled with gold, but with candles, thick, long burning, wrapped in cloth. "To keep the light alive," he said. Brenna didn't cry. She only nodded and whispered, "Then I'll light to tonight." Word spread of the widow's lantern, how it glowed every night, joined by others across the land, to whom Other windows lit candles at dusk, quietly, without fanfare, signal of resistance, not in weapons, but in warmth. Even soldiers began to notice, wondering why so many lights stayed on in houses with no coin. The king's advisors whispered of rebellion, but it was not rebellion, it's remembrance. One evening, a soldier knocked on Brenna's door. She opened it calmly and let him see the candle burning on the windowsill. "Why?" he asked. She looked him in the eye and answered, "Because even if you take the bread, the hands that baked it remember the recipe." He left without a word. That night, another candle appeared in the barracks window. No one ever claimed to have lit it. Robin returned a month later to find the valley glowing like a sky fallen to earth. Hundreds of lanterns. No shouting, no banners, only light. He stood on a hill and watched in silence, heart heavier and lighter all at once, and Brenna's lantern, Tig, still flickered faithfully. A flame passed down not by match, but by memory. There was a road, long forgotten, that wound through Sherwood, like a scar, narrow, stony, overgrown with brambles. It had once been a trade route before the taxes rose and the bridges broke. Now, only the desperate used it. One cold morning, a wagon was found there, a broken axle, wheels splintered. And a merchant sitting on the ground with his head in his hands. He had no guards, only goods meant for the sick in his village herbs, wool, dried fruits. Robin approached cautiously. "God." The man didn't lift his head. "You've come to rob me," he muttered. "At least leave the medicine." But Robin sat beside him and offered bread. "We came to walk beside you," he said. The merchant, surprised, raised his face, and Robin saw not greed, but exhaustion. "They taxed our healer," the merchant said. "She fled. Now I carry her burden." Marion joined him and began repairing the wheel. The thorns were thick. Along that road, tearing cloth and skin, Alan cut a path ahead, his hands bleeding, but steady. Will lifted the cart while Little John braced the axle with his shoulder. They moved slowly, not just because of the load, but because the road demanded it. It was not a path to be conquered, but respected. The sun began to rise as the cart groaned forward, inch by inch, toward the waiting village on the other side. When they arrived, the people came out barefoot, hands clasped together in awe. They had expected nothing. Instead, they received healing. The merchant wept as he handed over the goods, falling to his knees in gratitude. A young girl hugged Robin and placed a small flower crown on his head. "You're the king of the forest," she whispered. He smiled and said, "Only when the trees allow it." Before leaving, they repaired the bridge with ropes and stone. It would never be smooth, but it would hold. "Let this road carry mercy," Robin said, "and nothing else." The villagers named it the Path of Return, for it had brought back what was thought lost, not just medicine, but dignity. And in the forest, the brambles grew softer along the trail, as if given way in agreement. That night, the stars seemed brighter above that road, not because it had changed the world, but because it reminded the world that even thorny paths could lead to something good if walked with enough hands and enough heart. In a hidden glade at the center of Sherwood, where the grass grew tall and golden, a natural pool reflected the sky like polished silver. The outlaws called it the mirror, not because it showed faces, but because it revealed truths. Robin would sit there for hours, not speaking, watching the ripples as birds skimmed the surface and deer approached silently to drink. The pool held secrets and answers, not in words, but in stillness. One morning, Robin brought a wounded traveler there. The man had fled the crown's dungeons, scars across his back, chains still on his wrists. "They took my name," he whispered. "I am no one now." Robin knelt by the water and said, "Then let the forest rename you." The man leaned over the pool and saw not a prisoner, but a survivor. He wept quietly, the kind of tears that wash not just the face, but the memory. They stayed in the meadow for 3 days. The man rested, healed, watched the sunrise reflected in the water. Marion brought him herbs. Talon carved his new name into bark, Eldon, a name not from a cell, but from the sound of wind through leaves. Eldon chose to remain, building a shelter nearby and guiding lost travelers. He never picked up a sword, only a flute, which he played every dusk, sending music into the trees like drifting prayers. The mirror became a place of quiet rituals, not for gods, but for grief. Women brought the names of lost husbands. Children skipped stones across it and whispered wishes. Robin sometimes brought letters there, ones he could not answer. He'd place them on the water and watch them sink, their words absorbed into the deep hush of the forest. The mirror knows what to keep, he'd say. Once, a soldier came with sword drawn, expecting enemies, but after sitting beside the pool for a night, he left his blade at its edge and walked away barefoot. No one stopped him. The forest did not require apologies, only awareness. The mirror never judged, only reflected what was already inside. And long after Robin was gone, the meadow remained untouched. The pool still glimmered beneath the sky, holding the memory of those who had wept beside it. A place not of miracles, but of gentle reckonings. A place where even the weary found themselves again, rippling softly in reflection. Asterisk, there was a night when the wind would not stop moving, brushing leaves, swaying branches, carrying with it something more than breeze. It was the kind of wind that spoke, not with words, but with rhythm. Robin stood alone on a ridge, his bow in hand, not to fire, but to listen, for arrows in Sherwood were not just weapons, they were messages. They carried truth faster than feet could travel. And tonight, truth was stirring far below. A noble's caravan approached, larger than usual, with banners high and drums beating. It was not carrying gold, but letters, sealed and urgent, meant to silence dissent. Robin had learned of it from a boy whose uncle was imprisoned for singing a song of hope. If those letters reached the court, the boy said, the songs will die. That was enough. Robin called his archers, but asked them to bring silence, not blood. Each outlaw chose a tree and a height, bows drawn, breath slow. They did not shoot to kill, only to pin cloaks to wood, satchels to soil, wheels to ruts. Arrows flew like sighs, precise and soft, landing with the authority of thunder wrapped in whisper. The caravan stopped, horses rearing, riders ducking, but no one harmed. And when the wind stilled, all the letters lay scattered, pinned open, exposed to the night. Robin stepped forward, took one, and read aloud. It spoke of banning symbols, burning books, punishing names. He dropped it in the fire they lit right there, beneath the moon. Words can wound, Marion said beside him, but they can also be healed. One by one, the letters burned, not out of hate, but out of mercy. Their ashes rose into the canopy like prayers rephrased by flame. By dawn, as the caravan turned around, lighter in purpose, heavier in thought, the wind began to rest, and the archers disappeared once more, leaving behind no trace but feathers and holes in silk. In Sherwood, even arrows could teach, and justice, when it flew, did not always aim for the heart. Sometimes it aimed for the fear. The ridge where Robin stood would later be named Arrow's Rest, not because of violence, but because it was the place where weapons found wisdom. And silence became stronger than steel. Winter had come quietly that year, with snow that fell like blessings and ice that softened branches into boughs. The forest shimmered with frost, and every breath felt like a whisper made visible. Food was scarce, fires burned low, but in a hidden part of Sherwood, where a wide clearing opened beneath a ring of pines, Robin had a plan, not to fight or to hide, but to gather. Let us feed the ones no one sees, he said. Let us remember the forgotten. For weeks they prepared. Bread was baked in silence. Salted fish collected from riverside villages. Apples dried over slow fires. Woolen wraps stitched from donated cloaks. The outlaws became hosts, not hunters. Every night they left notes in the hands of elders, under the doors of widows, beside the beds of sick children. Come to the clearing. When the stars arrive, bring nothing but your name. And they came. Hundreds, some barefoot, some limping, some silent from grief too deep for words. They found not warriors, but tables, wooden, simple, adorned with evergreen. Robin welcomed each one with a bow of the head, saying only, "You are remembered." Marion offered warm cider. Little John carried a pot of stew, or played an old flute, the notes rising like warmth into the frozen sky. That night, no one asked where the food came from, or why the forest was filled with kindness. They simply ate and sang and leaned on each other. A woman who hadn't smiled since her husband's passing laughed aloud when a child gave her a painted rock. A man once cursed as a thief wept when he was handed a fresh loaf. Robin walked among them, not as a legend, but as a neighbor. When the fire finally dimmed and the guests began to sleep beneath woolen cloaks, the outlaws took turns keeping watch, not from fear, but from care. They stood as sentinels of peace. As dawn came and the snowflakes thinned, Robin whispered, "This is our crown. This is our court." And Marion replied, "This is why we remain." That feast was never repeated, not because it failed, but because it lived on in every story told after. The Feast of the Forgotten became legend, a single night when justice wore a smile. In the forest, cold and quiet, wrapped everyone in one shared dream. In a box buried deep beneath a tree stump near the border of Sherwood, there rested one final coin, old, tarnished, nearly forgotten. It had once belonged to a merchant who had starved rather than sell it, believing it held luck. Robin found it years later, wrapped in a cloth with a note, "If you find this, help someone else before yourself." He kept it close, but never spent it. It was not money, it was meaning. As time passed and victories mounted, Robin still carried the coin. On rainy days, he would take it out and watch the way light played across its battered surface. It reminded him of the line between greed and hope, of how easy it was to believe that holding something meant owning it, and of how many lives had been changed by those who would let go instead of keeping. One morning, a boy arrived, shivering and alone, his shoes worn to threads. "I've walked 3 days," he said, "to find the man who gives." Robin knelt and gave him food, a cloak, and warm water. Then he reached into his pouch and held out the coin. "This is yours now," he said. The boy stared at it. "But it's just a coin." Robin smiled. "It's everything if you give it away someday." Boy took it, eyes wide with wonder, and nodded slowly. He said no more, but Robin saw in him the fire he'd once seen in Alan and in himself. That spark that asks, could I be part of something greater than survival? He left the forest with a coin in his pocket and a seed in his heart. What grew from it, only time would know. Robin never saw him again. But years later, stories came of a young man in a far village who gave all he had to heal the sick, feed the lost, and listen to the unseen. And those who asked him why, he would simply hold up the old coin and say, "Because once someone trusted me with more than gold." And thus the last coin, though never melted or spent, bought more peace than all the crowns of England combined. It traveled farther than armies and stayed longer than kings. Asterisk among the belongings, collected from years of quiet raids and returns, Marian had kept a bundle of torn cloaks, pieces of green, gray, brown, and blue, each one once worn by someone who had given without asking. They may be scraps, she said, but they hold stories. One afternoon, as winter winds rattled through the leaves, she began stitching them together, not for warmth alone, but to preserve memory. Each patch was hand-sewn with care, not uniform, but meaningful, a tapestry disguised as a cloak. Alan helped gather the pieces, asking who each one had belonged to. This, Marian said, touching a faded green swatch, was from a woman who gave us bread when she had only 2 loaves. And this brown one is from a boy who used it to wrap a squirrel with a broken leg. As the cloak grew, it became heavier, not with fabric, but with remembrance. Robin, watching nearby, said nothing, but inside he felt every thread like a heartbeat. When it was done, Marian laid it over a rock near their fire. The others gathered slowly, one by one, drawn not by ceremony, but by feeling. They took turns, placing a hand on it, whispering a name or a wish. Robin placed a feather from the Queen's falcon at the center. Its cloak, he said, will never be worn. It is not for warmth. It is for witness. And so, it stayed on that stone, draped like a flag the wind had chosen to fold rather than fly. In time, rain soaked it, snow covered it, moss climbed its edges, but no one removed it. Instead, the people built a low wooden shelter over the rock, just enough to protect it from decay. Travelers who passed through Sherwood were invited to kneel there, not to pray, but to remember. Some left buttons. Others left tears. Some left only silence, the deepest offering of all. And in the seasons that followed, whenever someone asked what it meant, the answer was always the same. This is what remains when we choose each other. The cloak became a symbol of unity, not conquest. A flag that did not wave for war, but wrapped the names of the nameless in peace. Sherwood held the cloak as it held every memory, softly, without pride, but with a stillness that made even the crows stop calling that asterisk. There were days in Sherwood when fog came so thick it softened even the sharpest shapes. Trees became ghosts. Paths disappeared. Sound grew strange, closer than it was. On such a morning, Marian heard it first. A faint melody, far away, weaving through the mist like silver thread. She stopped mid-step, listening. A voice, low and gentle, was singing. Not words, just sounds that carried comfort through the fog. Robin heard it next, pausing on a ridge as the notes floated toward him. "That's no song of soldiers," he said. "That's a lullaby." They followed the sound slowly, careful not to speak, letting the song lead them. Through branches blurred with dew, they found her, an old woman sitting on a tree stump, eyes closed, singing to no one, or perhaps to everyone. She opened her eyes when they arrived, but did not stop singing. Instead, she smiled and finished the verse. "You've followed sound," she said. "Most follow shadow." Marian knelt. "What do you sing for?" The woman looked up at the trees. "For the ones who cannot anymore. For my sister who never returned. For a child who dreamed of a bell. For the wind, so it remembers we are here." They built a small fire and asked her to stay the night. She did. That evening, she taught them songs from long ago, lullabies, sung in fields, at hearths, in prison corners, songs that had no author, only feeling. Alan memorized them all, or added chords on a carved pipe. They sang until the fog lifted, and when it did, it felt like the forest had exhaled a secret it had kept for years. When she left, the woman gave Robin a thin bell strung on a piece of yarn. "Ring it when the world forgets to be kind," she said. He wore it around his neck under his cloak, and though he rarely rang it, its presence reminded him that softness was also strength. that not all revolutions were loud, and some nights, when the mist rolled in again, they swore they heard the song return, just faint enough to doubt, just real enough to believe. In Sherwood, even fog had memory, asterisk, in a clearing framed by 3 leaning birch trees. A carpenter named Tolan built what no one else thought to build: benches. Not weapons, not traps, not gates, just places to sit. He sat little, worked with worn tools, and carved quietly from dawn to dusk. People need a place to rest, he'd say, smoothing a plank, even those who carry the world on their back. Robin came to know him, not through words, but through the weightlessness he felt sitting on one of his creations. Tolan built benches for the sick, the grieving, the watching. Some had carved hands, some had birds, some had nothing but time pressed into them. He never sold them. He left them on trails, outside huts, near river bends. Let the world find them, he said. They'll know what they're for. Marion once asked if he missed building homes. No, he said, it's a shelter enough. One day, a soldier fleeing battle collapsed near one of Tolan's benches. When he awoke, he found bread wrapped in cloth beside him and a note burned into the wood. Stillness Hills. He stayed 3 days, left a pouch of seeds in return, and went back to his village to plant a garden. Word spread that the benches could mend more than broken bodies. They could mend directions, hearts, beliefs. Robin asked Tolan to join them. We need your kind of making, he said. But Tolan refused gently. I already have, he said, gesturing to a bench placed near the widow's lantern. Let your stories have a place to sit. I will not need to follow if they reach me. I've been bound to that wisdom. Some warriors used wood in silence. When Tolan died years later, they carved his name into the largest bench he ever made, set beneath a weeping willow. No stone, just the seat, facing sunrise. And on quiet mornings, birds still land there, and travelers still sit, unsure why they stopped walking, only glad that they did. In a world where movement is praised, Sherwood remembered the power of a place to pause, and in every bench Tolan left behind, a part of the forest still invited you to stay a little longer. Not far from the southern border of Sherwood lay a river known for its stillness, a mirror-like current that rarely roared. Even after storms, for years, it had no crossing. Caravans detoured miles around it. Its villagers waded across in summer, shivered through it in winter. But one day, Robin stood at its edge and said, Kay, let's build something, not to guard treasure, but to carry it. People, stories, time. The outlaws gathered logs, stones, and rope. The design was simple, curved, strong, woven with care. Children from nearby farms brought pails of nails. Elders offered advice, recipes, and songs while they worked. It took weeks, not because of difficulty, but because of patience. Each plank was laid with intention. The bridge rose not like a monument, but like a secret slowly remembered. When it was finished, there was no ribbon, no trumpet, just the sound of footsteps on new wood. Robin crossed first, then returned to the center and knelt. Let this carry. More than feet, he said. Let it carry forgiveness. Let it carry return. Marion added a carved piece of bark with a single word. Home. No name was given to the bridge. Let it belong to all, they agreed. Soon, the bridge became part of the forest's rhythm. Lovers met in its middle. Traders passed by lantern. Light. Elders sat with their thoughts as the water whispered underneath. It connected more than land. It connected memory. Stories traveled faster because of it, and sometimes messages were left on its railing. Bundles of herbs. Letters with no signature. Feathers tied with string. One night, a noble's child, lost during a hunt, found their way across it. On the other side, an outlaw waited, not with threat, but with a cloak. "You're safe now," she said, and guided him home. When asked what saved him, he simply replied, "The bridge knew the way." And from then on, even those who had feared Sherwood began to bless it. A bridge that bore no title became the most trusted crossing in the kingdom, 'cause in Sherwood, it wasn't what you built that mattered. It was why. Up. And the unnamed bridge, built without pride, became proof that kindness, when crafted carefully, could carry the weight of the world. Asterisk, it had rained for 3 days, softly, constantly, not in storms, but in gentle drops that never ceased. The forest glistened, its green deeper, its roots soaked with memory. Fires crackled slower, cloaks hung heavier, but no one complained. Robin walked beneath the trees, letting the rain land freely on his face. "The forest is weeping," he said, "but not in sorrow, in release." The outlaws moved slower those days. Tasks were done in silence. Stories were told in whispers, with steam rising from bowls of soup. No raids were planned, no messages sent, only listening. The trees creaked in rhythm. Water dripped from leaves like ticking clocks. "This is how the land exhales," Marian said. "Let it breathe." Land sat beneath the cedar, writing in a journal made of scraps. "What are you recording?" Will asked. "Not the rain," Alan answered, "but how it sounds on different branches." He was right. On oak, it tapped. On ash, it trickled. On holly, it danced. Even the forest's sadness had music. That music made stillness sacred. One morning, Robin found a fox curled beside their fire, not to steal, but to sleep. No one disturbed it. Even the animals, it seemed, needed pause. The world, usually so demanding, had lowered its voice. In this gentle dampness, memories softened. Wounds dried slower, but truer. The rain had made everything heavier, but nothing harder. By the 4th day, the rain finally eased, and the air smelled new. Not clean, but cleared. Sky, still gray, allowed one beam of sunlight to slip through, touching the center of camp like a blessing. They sat together in silence, watching it. No one spoke. No one needed to. In the forest, the truest prayers were made without words. Later that night, Robin whispered, "Let the world remember this, that rain, when patient, does not destroy. It restores." And the next morning, the forest shimmered, not because the sun had returned, but because the silence had been honored. Asterisk, one dusk, a stranger arrived. He wore no armor, no cloak, only simple shoes and eyes that had traveled farther than his feet. He entered Sherwood without fear, walked past warning signs, and reached the campfire without speaking. The outlaws rose with caution, but Robin raised a hand. "Let him sit," he said. "He carries no harm." The man did not ask for food. He simply took a seat and closed his eyes. When asked his name, he smiled. "I've had many. You may choose one." Marian asked where he came from. "A place where justice lost its voice," he replied. "But I heard a rumor. It lives here." Alan asked if he came to join them. "No," he said, "only to witness." So he stayed, not as a recruit, but as mirror. He listened more. Then he spoke, and yet they learned more from him than from a dozen speeches. He fixed tools without being asked, prepared a saddle, planted seeds near the widow's lantern. When a child cried in the woods, he held her until she slept. When a fox limped past the fire, he removed a thorn from its paw. He moved like someone who expected nothing, but gave everything. Robin watched him closely. "You were what peace looks like when it walks," he thought. On the 7th day, the man stood. "It is time." No one asked where he was going. Only Will handed him a loaf. Marian offered a scarf. Alan gave him a drawing. Robin approached last and offered nothing, only silence and a nod. "Right. You've reminded us who we are when no one watches," he said. The man smiled. That is all I came for, as he walked away, disappearing into the tree line like fog in reverse. They realized they hadn't learned his name, nor his past. Only that, for 7 days, they had been seen not as outlaws or fighters, but as people. And that was enough. Sometimes, the most powerful arrivals are not the ones who bring change, but the ones who reveal it was there all along. Asterisk. It was a rare day when the forest demanded nothing. No letters arrived, no soldiers marched, no storms approached. The sky was calm, the ground dry, the birds busy with their own lives. Robin stood and stretched, expecting tension, but there was none. He turned to Marian. Perhaps today, nothing is required. She smiled. Then let us do it well. We played. Not with weapons, but with time. Will told riddles. Alan built towers of stones. Little John made tea from wild mint and shared stories of things that never happened. Laughter came easily, rolling through the branches like wind over soft grass. It wasn't loud, just constant. It's like a stream finding its path. They cleaned the camp, not from duty, but from care. Folded cloaks, sharpened tools, braided rope. No rush, no goal, just the joy of small completion. Marian taught a young girl how to find edible roots. Robin carved a toy bow for a boy who had lost his father. The boy didn't cry. He just said, "I'll guard the birds now." That night, they ate slowly. No planning, no guarding, just being. The fire was warmer. The stars, more curious. Even the moon seemed to pause a little longer over the forest. And when Robin laid back and looked up, he whispered, "May we always remember this, that nothing is sometimes everything." 'Cause, in a world that always demanded action, Sherwood reminded them of the miracle of rest, of presence, of existing without expectation. And in doing so, they built something stronger than defense. They built ease, and long after battles resumed and roads turned dangerous again, they would recall this day as the rarest treasure of all, the day nothing asked for them and they gave to it anyway. Asterisk. Years passed. Trees grew taller. Alan became a leader. Marian grew silver in her hair. The forest remained, but Robin felt it differently. It's not dimmed, but full, as if it no longer needed his every step. He watched the others take charge and smiled more. Often, "The roots are deep now," he said. "I can walk lighter." One morning, he saddled his horse without a word and rode alone. Deeper into the trees, he visited each place, the mirror pool, the widow's lantern, the cloak on the rock. He knelt at the unnamed bridge, sat on Toland's bench, left a feather, find a chapel. No grand farewell, just a quiet honoring. The forest seemed to know, swaying gently, making room. Even the deer watched him pass without alarm. He reached the oldest tree and rested beneath it, eyes closed. No pain, just stillness, just breath. He felt the pulse of the land, the rhythm of every arrow loosed, every loaf shared, every child protected. "I was never the forest," he whispered. "I was only one of its voices." And then he slept, like a man vanishing, but like a seed returning to soil. They found him the next day, peaceful. No wound, no cry, only peace. Marian placed her hand on his chest. "He gave more than he took," she said. Alan wept, not with grief, but with gratitude. The forest was quiet, not mourning, but remembering. They buried him near the tree. Marker, only a ring of stones and a circle of feathers. And from that spot, years later, grew a tree so straight and tall, it pierced the clouds. The children called it Robin's Reach. Birds nested in its arms. Travelers leaned against it, and beneath it, the forest whispered stories in the breeze, not of battles, not of treasure, but of a man who listened. Time moved on, as it always does. Kings changed, Wars ended. New ones began. Roads were built, widened, worn. Sherwood remained. Trees grew in new directions. Paths shifted. The mirror pool still shimmered. The bridge still stood. The benches still welcomed. And the stories, they never stopped being told. Children born far from the forest dreamed of it anyway. Artists painted it without seeing it. Old songs sang its name in different tongues. But the forest didn't need fame. It only needed memory. And it was full of it, in roots, in stones, in air that smelled like rain and ash and laughter. "Hey," traveler once asked an old woman, "where is the treasure of Sherwood?" She pointed to the trees and said, "There, but I see no gold," he replied. She smiled and answered, "That's because it's been given away." He never forgot that answer. He told it to his children, who told it to theirs. And so, Sherwood lived not just in England, but in hearts. In every act of kindness done without reward. In every gift passed silently. In every moment, someone chose mercy over control. Robin's arrows no longer flew, but their shape remained in courage, in clarity, in cause. The forest was quiet now, but not empty, never empty, because every time someone asked, "What can I do for others?" a leaf turned in Sherwood, a branch swayed, a memory stirred, and the story, always the story, continued, even in sleep, especially in sleep, for in dreams we still walk there, and the forest still answers.